The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting a cold, sterile glow over the hospital waiting room. It smelled faintly of disinfectant and overbrewed coffee, the kind that had been sitting in the pot too long. Rows of metal chairs lined the walls, most occupied by people with weary faces and restless hands. The air was thick with quiet coughing, the rustle of jackets, and the occasional squeak of nurses' sneakers against the polished floor. Anna stood in line near the reception desk, one hand on her lower back, the other gently resting over the swell of her 8-month pregnancy. Her coat hung open, too small now to button over her belly. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, trying to ease the pressure in her spine. The line was moving slowly, and every step felt like a mile. She tried not to think about the empty space beside her, the space where Daniel, her husband, should have been. It had been 3 months since the accident. The phone call in the middle of the night, the trembling voice on the other end, the sound of her own knees hitting the floor. Since then, everything had blurred into an endless list of things she had to handle alone. Paperwork, bills, the baby registry they'd never finished, and now prenatal appointments where she sat in the waiting room with couples holding hands, avoiding the glances of strangers who didn't know what to say. Anna blinked hard, forcing the moisture in her eyes back. The receptionist's voice called out a name from the front, and someone shuffled forward. She still had at least 5 people ahead of her. The glass doors at the hospital's entrance slid open with a sigh, letting in a gust of cool air. A tall man walked in, his hair damp from the rain outside. He had a boy with him, maybe 8 years old, who clutched his hand tightly and carried a faded blue backpack. The man's coat was rumpled, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. He glanced around the room, scanning the line, the chairs, the signs on the wall, as though calculating his next move. He noticed the line, exhaled heavily, and stepped to the end, directly behind Anna. She felt the presence of someone tall behind her, the quiet shift of his weight. For a moment, they just stood there in silence, both staring ahead. Then a soft cough came from the boy. Not a nervous cough, but the kind that sounded heavy, like it had been lingering. The man squeezed his son's hand and murmured something Anna couldn't hear. She glanced back briefly, catching the boy's pale face and glassy eyes. He didn't look scared, just tired. Anna turned back quickly, not wanting to intrude. But a part of her, the part that still remembered being a child with fevers and long nights, felt a tug. A sudden wave of discomfort made her inhale sharply and press her hand into her lower belly. Her appointment wasn't for labor, it was just a routine check, but the thought of standing another 30 minutes felt unbearable. She adjusted her stance, willing herself to hold it together. Behind her the man shifted again. His voice was quiet but steady. "You're pretty far along," he said almost hesitantly. Anna looked back. His eyes were kind, but there was a deep tiredness in them, the kind that spoke of sleepless nights and too many worries at once. 8 months, she replied. He nodded. "Long line today?" "Yeah," she said, managing a faint smile. "Feels longer when you're on your feet." His gaze dropped to her belly, then to the boy leaning against his side. "You waiting for the OB wing?" "Yes." She hesitated. "You?" "Pediatrics." His voice softened as he looked at his son. "He's been fighting something for weeks now." There was a pause. The boy sniffled quietly, resting his head against his father's arm. The man took a breath, then looked back at Anna. "You should go ahead of us," he said suddenly. Anna blinked. What? Take our spot. You shouldn't be standing this long." She frowned slightly. "But your son, he'll be okay a little longer," the man said with a kind of firm gentleness. "You need it more." Anna opened her mouth to protest, but there was something in his tone, not pity but an unspoken understanding, a shared recognition of exhaustion. She finally nodded. "Thank you." They switched places, and as Anna stepped forward, she caught the boy giving her a small, shy smile. Something about it made her chest ache. The receptionist called the next name, and Anna moved closer to the front. She glanced back one more time, seeing the man rub his son's shoulder, his eyes far away, like he too carried the weight of someone missing. She didn't know it yet, but this single act of kindness was about to change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. As the receptionist looked up and asked for her name, Anna realized she didn't even know his. "Anna Collins," she told the receptionist, her voice steady despite the ache in her lower back. The woman at the desk typed quickly, confirmed her appointment, and directed her toward the elevators. Anna followed the signs, her boots clicking softly against the polished floor, the muted beeps of machines echoing from nearby corridors. As she waited for the elevator, she glanced back toward the waiting area. The man and his son were still there, moving slowly forward in the line. For a brief moment, his eyes met hers, just enough for her to lift her hand in a small, silent thank you. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and she stepped inside the elevator before the doors closed. The appointment itself was uneventful. The doctor measured her belly, checked her blood pressure, and reassured her that everything looked normal. But Anna found her mind drifting. She kept seeing the boy's pale face, the tired slump of his shoulders, and the quiet, resolute way his father had stood behind him. She remembered Daniel, the way he had once offered his own spot in a crowded bus line to an elderly man without hesitation. "You can tell a lot about someone by how they treat strangers," he had said. When Anna left the OB wing, she walked past the same waiting room on her way to the exit. The chairs were arranged differently now, more spaces empty. The man was sitting off to the side, the boy leaning against him, half asleep. A small paper cup of water rested on the boy's knee. Anna slowed her pace without realizing it. She didn't want to intrude, but she also didn't want to just walk away. "You're still here?" she asked softly. The man looked up. His expression was guarded at first, but it softened when he recognized her. "Yeah, they're backed up today." He gave a slight shrug. "Longer wait for pediatrics." She glanced at the boy. "How's he doing?" "Better than this morning." He brushed the boy's damp hair from his forehead. "Just a stubborn flu, I think. But it's been dragging on for too long." Anna hesitated, then sat in the empty chair beside him. "I didn't thank you properly before. That was kind of you." His lips curved into a small, tired smile. "Not really. Just fair. You looked like you needed to sit sooner than we did." For a moment, they simply sat together, the low hum of hospital life filling the space between them. Announcements crackling over the intercom, the faint squeal of a cart's wheels, the muted cough of someone across the room. "I'm Anna," she said finally. "Michael," he replied. He gestured toward the boy. "This is Jacob." Jacob stirred at the sound of his name but didn't open his eyes. Anna offered a gentle smile, more to Michael than the boy. "You come here often?" she asked, then realized how strange it sounded, and quickly added, "I mean, for Jacob's appointments." Michael's gaze dropped. "More than I'd like. It's been a rough year." Anna didn't push. There was a heaviness in his tone, a story behind it that didn't feel like hers to ask for. Not yet. She understood that kind of weight. Before she could say more, a nurse stepped into the room and called, "Jacob Harris?" Michael stood, carefully shifting Jacob upright. The boy blinked drowsily, rubbing his eyes. "Guess that's us," Michael said. He turned to Anna. "It was nice meeting you, Anna Collins." She nodded. "You too, Michael Harris." As they walked toward the pediatric wing, Anna found herself watching them longer than she meant to. There was something in the way Michael's hand rested protectively on Jacob's shoulder. Not just the care of a parent, but the quiet determination of someone who'd been through storms and was still standing. She stepped out into the cold air outside the hospital, pulling her coat tighter. Her mind told her she'd probably never see them again, but her heart whispered something else. That their paths weren't done crossing, and she was right. The week after her appointment, Anna sat at her kitchen table, sipping lukewarm tea while rain pattered against the windows. The baby's kicks had been stronger lately, each one a reminder of the approaching due date and of how much she still had to figure out on her own. The mail lay scattered in front of her. Bills, a baby store flyer, and a reminder card from the hospital for her next checkup. She was reaching for it when the phone rang. "Hello?" A pause, then a voice she recognized instantly. "Anna, it's Michael Harris. We met at the hospital." Her hand stilled on the table. "Michael, hi. How did you—" "I hope it's not weird that I called," he said quickly. "The receptionist at the desk remembered you and gave me your number when I asked. Jacob's pediatrician thinks it's important for him to have more support at home. But—" his voice trailed off for a second. "It's been complicated." Anna leaned back, sensing the strain behind his words. "Is Jacob okay?" "He's stable, but not bouncing back like we hoped, and—" he hesitated. "Look, this is going to sound strange, but I could use some advice from someone who's been where I am, or close to it." She frowned. "What do you mean?" There was a pause, then he said quietly, "My wife passed away 2 years ago. Jacob's been struggling ever since. I thought I had it under control, but lately, I don't know." The words sank into her. The hollow in his voice was familiar, the sound of someone who had been carrying too much for too long. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I lost my husband 3 months ago." Silence stretched between them, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Finally, Michael said, "That's not something you expect to have in common with a stranger." "No," Anna murmured. "But maybe it means we understand each other a little better than most." He exhaled slowly. "I think Jacob needs to be around people who get it. Not just kids his age, but someone who knows what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under you. And I think—" he stopped himself. "Never mind, I'm asking too much. You're about to have your own hands full." Anna looked at the stack of unopened mail, the baby crib still in pieces in the corner of the living room. She could have said no, and no one would have blamed her, but she thought of Jacob's tired eyes and of Michael's quiet, protective stance in that waiting room. "What do you need?" she asked. It wasn't a commitment, not yet, but it was enough for him to tell her about an upcoming specialist appointment in another city, the logistics of getting there with a sick child, and how hard it was without someone else to help carry the load. "Let me think about it," Anna said. "I'll call you tomorrow." That night she lay awake, her mind turning over the idea. She could already hear her mother's voice warning her about getting too involved in someone else's troubles. She had enough of her own. But something in her heart, stubborn and insistent, kept circling back to the same thought. What if you were in his shoes? The next morning she called him back. "I'll go with you," she said simply. For the first time, she heard a flicker of relief in his voice. "Thank you, Anna." Neither of them knew it then, but agreeing to that trip would pull them into each other's lives in ways they weren't ready for, forcing them to confront the grief they'd both been avoiding and the question neither dared to ask. Could they heal without letting someone else in? The day of the trip began before dawn. The streets were still wet from the night's rain, and a pale grey mist clung to the edges of the road as Anna waited outside her apartment building. Her overnight bag was small, just enough for one night, and she kept shifting it from one hand to the other while watching for Michael's car. When he pulled up, Jacob was in the back seat, bundled in a navy hoodie, his face still pale but alert. Michael got out to help with her bag, his movements quick and practiced, like someone used to doing everything himself. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, sliding into the passenger seat. The drive started quietly, the hum of the tires filling the silence. Jacob had a tablet in his lap, but wasn't really watching the screen. Anna caught him glancing at her in the rearview mirror now and then, as if still deciding whether he liked this new person in his father's life. 2 hours in, traffic thickened near the city. Michael gripped the steering wheel tighter, jaw set. "You okay?" Anna asked. He gave a short nod. "Just trying not to be late. These specialists don't give second chances if you miss your slot." She understood the tension in his voice, the way grief made every important appointment feel like a test you couldn't afford to fail. At the hospital, they checked Jacob in and waited in another unfamiliar lobby. This one smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, the walls lined with faded posters about children's health. Jacob leaned against Anna while Michael went to sign paperwork. She glanced down, surprised at how natural it felt, his small weight against her side. "You like dinosaurs?" she asked, nodding toward the sticker on his hoodie. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I used to draw them with Mom." Anna froze for a fraction of a second, unsure how to respond. She must have been a good artist. "She was," Jacob said simply, before leaning away again. When Michael returned, his expression was strained. "They're running behind. Could be a couple hours." The wait stretched endlessly. Anna went to find snacks, Michael pacing the hall with Jacob at his side. When she came back, she caught them mid-conversation, Jacob saying something about missing school plays. Michael crouched down to his level, promising they'd make the next one. It was a fragile promise, Anna could tell. Michael's eyes gave him away. The appointment itself was a blur of tests, questions, and cautious doctor speak. Words like monitor closely and possible follow-up treatment hung in the air, heavier than they sounded. By the time they left the hospital, the daylight was fading and Michael seemed somewhere far away in his thoughts. On the drive back, they hit a sudden downpour. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up and traffic slowed to a crawl. Anna noticed Michael's hands tightening on the wheel again. "We can stop somewhere if you need a break," she suggested. He shook his head. "Better to get home." But 20 minutes later, the rain turned into a wall of water, making it nearly impossible to see. Michael finally pulled into the parking lot of a roadside diner. They rushed inside, dripping and cold. Over grilled cheese sandwiches and coffee, the conversation turned unexpectedly personal. "When Daniel was alive," Anna said softly, "I thought I knew what my future looked like. Now I can barely plan next week." Michael stared at his cup. "Yeah. After Claire died, I stopped making long-term plans. Felt like tempting fate." They shared a look, one that held more understanding than any words could. But as the rain eased outside, something in Michael shifted. He checked his watch, his expression tightening again. "We should get going," he said. Anna felt it too. The unspoken pressure of everything unsolved. Whatever this trip had been, it wasn't going to fix what either of them carried. And as they stepped back into the wet night, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were both walking toward something bigger than either of them could control. The days that followed the trip passed in a haze of exhaustion and quiet struggle. Anna's belly grew heavier, a constant reminder of the life she was about to bring into a world that suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. Each day, she juggled doctor's appointments, nursery preparations, and the weight of a loneliness that settled deeper than she expected. Michael, too, seemed to withdraw into himself. The tired lines around his eyes grew more pronounced, and his usual guarded demeanor sometimes slipped, revealing cracks in the armor he'd built since Claire's passing. One cold, overcast afternoon, Anna sat in a small cafe near the hospital, her hands wrapped around a barely touched cup of tea. The room buzzed softly with low conversations and the clatter of cups, but her mind was somewhere else, restless and uneasy. Then her phone vibrated. It was a message from Michael. "Can we meet? There's something important I need to tell you." A wave of apprehension mixed with concern swept over her. She slipped on her coat and hurried through the damp streets, heading toward a quiet park she'd passed a few times, but never really noticed before. Michael was already there when she arrived, seated on a weathered wooden bench, beneath skeletal branches that scraped the grey sky. His coat was buttoned up tight, hands buried deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. Anna sat beside him, and for a long moment neither spoke. Finally, Michael took a breath, his voice low and trembling. "There's more to Jacob's condition than I told you." Her heart caught. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the cracked pavement at their feet. "The doctors found something serious. A rare heart condition. Genetic. It's something Claire had too, but she kept it private." The words hit Anna like a punch to the stomach. Jacob's pale face, his coughs, the long battles against illness. It wasn't just a stubborn flu or lingering virus. It was a ticking clock she hadn't seen. "I didn't want to tell you before," Michael confessed, voice cracking. "I was scared. I wanted to protect Jacob and myself." Anna reached out, her fingers brushing against his. "You don't have to face this alone." He looked at her, eyes glistening with a fragile mix of relief and vulnerability. "Thank you for staying, for understanding." They sat in silence, the cold wind nudging fallen leaves around them, the city noise fading into the distance. "I'm scared, Anna," he admitted. "I don't know how to do this without Claire. I don't know if I can." Anna's throat tightened. She knew that fear. It had shadowed her every step since Daniel's death. But she also knew something else, the quiet, stubborn strength that comes from choosing to keep going, even when everything feels broken. "We'll figure it out," she said firmly, "together." For the first time, the invisible walls they'd both built began to crumble. The loneliness that had defined their grief started to give way to something fragile and new, a tentative hope. Over the next few days, their conversations deepened, weaving between fears, memories, and the practical realities of Jacob's condition. Michael shared stories of Claire, her laughter, her determination, the way she had hidden her illness to shield her family. Anna spoke of Daniel, of the life they had planned, and the unexpected silence his absence had left. But the truth was heavy. The looming threat of Jacob's diagnosis hung over them, a shadow that darkened every smile and whispered promise. One evening, as Anna rested on the couch with her swollen feet elevated, Michael came over carrying a small photo album. He sat beside her, opening it carefully. "These are pictures Claire took of Jacob," he said softly. She wanted him to know who she was. Anna flipped through the pages. A toddler's first steps, messy birthday cakes, quiet afternoons in the park. The images spoke of love, loss, and the haunting beauty of memories too painful to forget. Tears spilled down Anna's cheeks, and Michael's hand found hers once more. They both understood. Their grief was not a chain to hold them back, but a bridge, fragile, uncertain, but real, leading toward whatever might come next. Yet, even as they found comfort in each other's company, the weight of the future pressed on them. Jacob's heart condition demanded choices they weren't ready to make. Tests, treatments, uncertain outcomes, and somewhere beneath the fear and the sorrow, a question lingered. Could they open their hearts enough to let healing in? As the sky outside darkened to twilight, Anna looked at Michael and saw reflected in his eyes the same mix of hope and fear she felt herself. They were no longer just two strangers bound by loss. They were something new. Allies, companions, maybe even something more. But the hardest journey was still ahead. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of call no parent ever wants to hear. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but every word felt like a punch to the gut. "Jacob's test results are in," the doctor said. "We need to schedule surgery immediately. It's critical." Anna's hands shook as she pressed the phone to her ear. The air around her seemed to grow colder, heavier, as if the world itself held its breath. She barely remembered hanging up before dialing Michael's number, her heart pounding so loudly she feared he might hear it over the line. When Michael answered, his voice was calm but tight. "Anna, what did they say?" "We don't have a choice," she whispered. "Surgery. It's the only way." A long silence stretched between them, filled with unsaid fears and desperate hopes. Then Michael's voice broke through, fragile and raw. "I'm scared, Anna. What if something goes wrong?" Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to be strong. "Me too, but Jacob needs us. Both of us." The next days became a whirlwind. The hospital turned into a maze of white walls, endless corridors, and waiting rooms stained with anxiety. Anna juggled her own growing pregnancy with the mounting pressure of Jacob's condition. Michael was a pillar of quiet strength, except in those moments when the exhaustion took over and his mask slipped to reveal the scared father beneath. One evening, they found themselves in a dimly lit waiting room. Jacob lay asleep in a hospital bed, hooked to monitors that beeped steadily, while Michael sat beside him, clutching his small hand. Anna watched them, her heart aching with a mixture of fear and admiration. She knelt down and whispered, "We have to be strong for him." Michael looked up, eyes shining with tears. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." They held onto each other, two broken souls searching for courage. When the day of surgery arrived, the hospital corridors felt endless, suffused with a sterile chill and the distant echoes of footsteps. Anna paced restlessly, her phone gripped tightly in her hand, praying for any news. Hours crawled by, every moment stretched and cracked under the weight of uncertainty. Then finally the surgeon appeared, tired but steady. The surgery was complicated but successful, Jacob stable. Relief hit Anna like a tidal wave. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she sank into the nearest chair. Michael reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "We did it," he whispered. But the victory was bittersweet. Jacob's road to recovery would be long and uncertain. Anna's own baby could arrive at any time, adding to the pressure that never seemed to relent. In those quiet hospital halls, as the night stretched on, something shifted between them, a bond forged in fire, in fear, and in hope. They weren't just two grieving souls anymore. They were a team, bound by love, loss, and the fierce will to fight for the family they still had. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The morning light slipped softly through the hospital room's half-closed blinds, casting gentle shadows on the pale walls. Outside, the city was waking slowly, traffic stirring, distant voices rising, and birds beginning their tentative songs. Inside, time felt suspended in a fragile stillness. Jacob lay peacefully in his bed, a slight rise and fall marking each breath, the steady beep of the monitor a quiet reassurance. Beside him, Anna sat in a chair, fingers gently tracing circles on the back of his hand. Her own pregnancy was now at full term. The baby's movements had slowed, as if sensing the calm around her. Michael stood near the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. His eyes were tired, but brighter than they had been weeks ago. The weight that had pressed on him since Claire's death seemed lighter now, softened by hope and the support he had found in Anna. For months, they had both carried grief that isolated them, like two separate islands in a vast, stormy sea. But the ordeal with Jacob's heart condition, the long nights in waiting rooms, the tears and whispered fears, they had built a bridge between those islands, fragile yet unbreakable. "Thank you," Michael said quietly, turning toward Anna. His voice was thick with emotion, "for staying when you didn't have to, for believing in us." Anna smiled softly, warmth blooming in her chest. "I never stopped believing. Not in Jacob, not in you, not in the family we're becoming." They shared a glance, one full of unspoken promises, and the knowledge that the path ahead was still uncertain. Jacob's surgery had been a success, but the road to recovery would stretch long and winding. Anna's baby could arrive any day, adding new joys and challenges to their lives. In the weeks that followed, the hospital became a second home. Anna's daughter was born on a crisp autumn morning, a healthy, crying bundle who immediately filled the room with new light and laughter. Michael and Jacob visited often, their presence weaving a new pattern into Anna's daily life. Jacob's smile grew wider with each passing day, and Anna watched him reclaim fragments of childhood stolen by illness and loss. Michael, once worn down by despair, found renewed purpose and strength in the small moments: bedtime stories, shared meals, quiet talks in the park. Together, they built a family not by blood alone, but by choice, by love, and by the courage to heal. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in fiery hues, Anna sat on the porch of her small home, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Michael and Jacob sat beside her, the three of them wrapped in a comfortable silence that spoke of belonging. Michael broke the quiet first. I never thought I'd get here again, this feeling of hope. Anna looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. Neither did I, but here we are. Jacob tugged gently at Michael's sleeve, his voice shy but clear. Can we go to the park tomorrow? Michael smiled, ruffling his son's hair. Yes, buddy, we'll go. In that moment, Anna understood something deeper than words. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about carrying it forward with grace, letting it shape but not define them. Loss had carved scars, but love was the salve that softened the edges. She looked down at her daughter, fingers curling gently around the tiny hand resting on her chest. Sometimes, she whispered, the hardest journeys lead us to the greatest blessings. The stars began to appear one by one as night embraced the world, and as the family sat together, wrapped in warmth and quiet strength, the future felt wide open, full of possibilities they would face together, come what may. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness, a hand offered in a hospital line, a choice to stay when walking away seemed easier, can change a life forever. And sometimes those acts become the foundation of something beautiful and unbreakable.